Olá, sou a Mariana Alvim, bem-vindos ao Vale a Pena, o meu podcast onde conhecemos as pessoas enquanto leitores, com o apoio da WUC, a maior livraria online portuguesa. Fiquem por aí, vale a pena. Today I have with me Jeneva Rose. She was born in Wisconsin and currently lives in Chicago with her husband Drew and their English bulldogs Winston and Phyllis. And they're stubborn, I heard.
Very stubborn.
She's a New York Times best-selling author known for her psychological thrillers and mystery novels. Geneva is also known for her sharp wit and sense of humor, which she often incorporates into her writing and social media presence. And she has written several popular books, including The Perfect Marriage, which has sold millions of copies worldwide and has been translated into 29 languages. And now in Portuguese, O Casamento Perfeito. And before becoming a best-selling author, you were rejected. You said so 468 times. That story is amazing. You're an example for so many, even outside literature. Your perseverance. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for that intro and thank you for having me.
I'll speak about your books, but you want to talk first about your story about being rejected 468 times. Who's counting?
Just counting. Yeah, I was like, oh, I should go back and count up all my rejected queries over the years. So that's how I actually got to that number. I went through my email inbox and found them all.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so I started writing books. I had always been a writer my whole life, but it was in 2016 that I sat down and I said, I'm going to write one book and it was going to be for myself. And it was just going to be a bucket list item. And I had a corporate job and I just needed something else outside of that job. And I started writing that book, which I had tried many times before, and I just stopped around page 80. But I got halfway done, and I knew at the halfway point that I would finish it, and I knew I would write another. And from there, I started querying that book while I wrote the next book, which happened to be The Perfect Marriage. The first book did not, it got 100 rejections. Probably rightfully so on that one. I don't think it was ready. But then The Perfect Marriage, I ended up getting an agent with it, and I thought, oh, my whole life is going to change. And it didn't. I got a bunch of rejections from now publishers and editors. And I ended up parting ways with that agent. And then I was writing another book and I submitted that book, but no one wanted that book either. And it just kept happening. But I went to a very small publisher out of the UK that you didn't need an agent with, and they agreed to publish The Perfect Marriage. So I put everything into trying to get that book into readers' hands because it was such a small publisher that they didn't offer any marketing. They kind of just slapped a cover on it and threw it up on Amazon. But I did believe in the book and I put my all into marketing that book, which led to me finally getting an offer for a book. But even after the success of The Perfect Marriage, I was still accumulating rejections. And I just told myself that I was going to treat every no as a not right now or a noble attempt. And I was just going to keep writing and following this dream because I loved having something tangible that I could show other people, something outside of my job where I was working for a corporation because I was doing it for myself. And I refused to give up. And I think that applies to all situations, whether you want to be a writer or not. If you don't say no to yourself, because I did say no to myself first, thinking I couldn't do it. So I was my first rejection. But once I got over rejecting myself, that's what really propelled me forward to not take anyone else's rejections, because mine was the hardest.
Yeah, it always is. It's the imposter syndrome, but you overcame the imposter syndrome. Did you show your books to friends or how did it's amazing because as you said, it's not only for literature, it's for those who don't believe in themselves. You insisted and you insisted and you knew your value. Did you have someone to validate that for you, to help you with your security, your self-esteem?
I mean, because I'm my own worst critic. Still to this day, I have imposter syndrome. My husband he's always been, and when I first started writing, we weren't married yet, so he's always been the one in my corner telling me that I can do it. When I wanted to quit, he kind of forced me to keep going. By like, he would do this thing where it would be like a basket of prizes he picked out, and it could just be like candy or a candle or something like that. There was even like a Taylor Swift CD in there. And once I hit like a certain word count, he would let me pick a prize from the basket.
That's so sweet.
So he very much understood that I needed to be rewarded in order to keep going, that I couldn't just, I needed like positive reinforcement as well as, kind of you have to do this. What are you doing? Like, do you really want to give up on this? So when I was kind of down and out in myself, he was there to push me. So he was definitely my biggest supporter and still is to this day.
And you wrote books with him, the crime time, hashtag crime time. You've written it with your husband, right, Drew?
Yes, we wrote an audio original called hashtag Crime Time.
Exactly. So you got the candy, the candle, the candy, and Taylor Swift CD.
Yep, I got candy, candles, Taylor Swift CD, little stationery, just things I like for my desk.
That's so great. And you've got, of course, millions of copies. It was great that you insisted and he helped you, and congratulations on that. And we readers, thank you for that. So you have some of your books are The Girl I Was, One of Us is Dead, You Shouldn't Have Come Here. That one is in Portuguese. Não devias ter vindo. We have it in Portugal. You had even under a pseudonym, J.R. Adler, you had Kimberly King series, book 1 and 2. And then you have The Perfect Marriage, which just arrived in Portugal, O Casamento Perfeito, and then A Perfect Divorce, because we want to read that one. But first, let's talk about this translation, this Portuguese, O Casamento Perfeito. You want me to tell me? I have to tell you one thing about it, though. It's the book that I loved it. Congratulations. It's a book that I bet I'm not the first one to tell you this. In the end, I need to read it again. It's not that I didn't understand. It's because of the twist and I can't tell more.
Yeah.
So
It's
tell me about
definitely one that I've had lots of readers who have reread it to try to pick up on all the clues throughout, which there are a lot throughout of clues, double meanings when a character says something, it's not what, it has a double meaning to what they're saying. So it is a fun book for people to reread and figure out where everything fits together in the
and
end.
and you knew in the beginning, you knew how it would end. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to accomplish what you did. So how was your, well, first of all, let's talk about the story. You tell me.
Yeah, so The Perfect Marriage is about a top criminal defense attorney named Sarah Morgan who faces her most challenging case when she vows to defend her husband, a man accused of murdering his mistress.
Yeah, so first shock, he has a mistress. Second shock, she's dead. And she's the one, and he probably allegedly is the one that killed her.
Yes. And
That's
yeah,
it.
I knew like the big twist before I started writing it. There were other twists because I don't completely plot out my stories when I write them. I plot out just enough that I understand where the story's going, but also enough for the story to breathe and change. So there were twists in there that I did not have planned out and that came about as I was writing it. And it was like, oh yeah, this character would do that, or this one would do this. And that's like sometimes I surprise myself when I'm writing my books, or I'm like, ooh, I didn't even think of that until I like thought of it right then and there and I'm writing it.
Yeah, they become real, the characters.
They do. They become, especially like getting back with Sarah Morgan for The Perfect Divorce. It was like I thought it would be difficult getting back into her headspace because I write from her point of view. She has a point of view in The Perfect Marriage, and she has a point of view in The Perfect Divorce. And I wrote that book originally, The Perfect Marriage, in 2017 with major re-edits like in 2018 and again. But The Perfect Divorce I wrote in 2024 and the end
Yeah.
of 2023. So it had been, 5 years since I'd been in that character's head. But
Yeah.
I was right back in it. I was like, maybe I am a little bit Sarah Morgan. I don't know.
Well, I hope not for the concerning the mother-in-law.
The mother-in-law
I
or
hope she's
that
not yours.
husband cheats on me. Yeah, no, no.
It's great. They're very well developed, the stories, the characters.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So you also inspired sort of because you've done for yourself and you've done really good like on TikTok and also you sort of inspired the book talk trend.
Yes, I did start a book talk trend. That was when I knew like that there was going to be no marketing from the publisher and either it was going to pigeonhole me, so I could never land with a larger publisher. So I knew I needed to make sure that this book got into readers' hands and it was going to be on me to do it. And so I got on TikTok first as a viewer, because I had been marketing on like Instagram and Facebook, and I came from social media. That was my corporate job. Um, and when I got on TikTok as like a user, just scrolling through, I was like, I know at the time, everyone thought TikTok was just teenage girls dancing. But I was like, no, I'm learning DIY hacks. I'm getting movie recommendations, TV show recommendations, learning recipes. I was like, there is an audience here that wants to share information. They want to share their likes and their dislikes, likes. They want to teach people things. So I came up with the book talk that ended up becoming a trend. But it was me pretending I was the protagonist of my book, so Sarah Morgan, and that it was my real life story. But at the end, I hold up the book and I say that's actually the plot of my novel. So basically, it hooked someone enough that they were like, well, I want to find out what happens next. And that went crazy viral. It was like 5 million views in like 3 days. And it started a whole trend where readers were doing it, other authors were doing it, publishers were doing it. So that was very cool that it turned into something much larger.
Yeah, and I love the detail because you mentioned in an interview in a presentation you gave when you came here to Portugal, you said my video was about 30 seconds and people stopped sometimes at the 27th second. So
Yeah,
they didn't know the ending of the story, which was it wasn't
that
me,
it's
it's fiction.
that it was a book, and I thought my husband
Yeah.
was the accused murderer and that he had cheated on me. And he had been in a couple of my other videos, so they were like, "Wait, is he out on bail? Why are you still with him?" And I was like, "Oh God!" And I went and looked at the analytics, and it was like average watch time, 27 seconds. I was like, "Ah, they missed the book."
Yeah, the book part, the ending.
Yes.
So, Casamento Perfeito in Portugal, and the cover is beautiful, same as the American edition also. And now let's get to know you as a reader.
All right.
When did you fall in love with thrillers? Because the books you chose as a reader, and we'll get there, they're all mainly thrillers. Of course, that's your favorite genre. When did you fall in love with the genre?
With thrillers, I mean,
Yeah.
I would say all the way back to like, I mean, mysteries were like the Bailey School kids back in elementary school. And then in middle school, I loved Lois Duncan books, which were like thriller slash horror, because she wrote I Know What You Did Last Summer and Killing Mr. Griffin, and ones that actually turned into movies.
Yeah.
And I read all of her books. So it was actually funny because I am a person that fell out of love with reading for a while. And when Drew, my husband now, we would wake up in the mornings and I kind of fell out of love with reading in like towards the end of high school and then into college when they force you to read books that are like your classical books that may not be as entertaining to you. And I kind of was like, oh, I don't like reading anymore. And then my husband would get up in the mornings and he would read. And I would be like, okay. And I'd try to turn on the TV and he'd be like, no, stop, don't turn on any noise. And I was like, okay. I like play on my phone, it's making noise. And he's like, no. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? And he's like, read a book. And I was like, I don't like reading. And he's like, you like reading. There's no way you don't like reading. And then he's like, you just got to find something you love. And then I was like, oh, I actually hadn't picked up a book for fun because of all the reading I did and like towards the end of high school where I was in a lot of literature classes and then in college. And I thought back to when I loved reading, which was thrillers. And I picked up a bunch of thriller books. And that year, which was like maybe 2013, 2014, I read 50 books. And
Wow.
oh my God, I love reading again. I forgot how much I loved it. And it's been really interesting with The Perfect Marriage because there were a lot of people that had fallen out of love with reading like I did because of high school curriculum or college curriculum. And that's a book that reminded them how much they loved books again. And so I was like, I very much resonate with that because some of those first books were like the ones that made me reinvigorate my love for reading. So I was a reader and then I wasn't. And I loved reading true crime books too. That was something I got into in high school, reading a lot of true crime novels because my mother loved to read those too. So yeah, I was and then I wasn't. And yes,
Huh. And you're back.
I'm back and I've been back for a while now.
Sure. So with all the writing and all the tours and all, you barely can't stop. When and where are you able to read?
When and where? A lot of times at night or in the mornings, my husband likes to start with a quiet morning, and so he'll get up and read, and then I'll read too, or at night before bed. I usually bring like my Kindle with me, so I always have something to read when I'm just, rather than reaching for my phone. If I'm waiting in like in a doctor's office or I'm waiting for something, I can reach for my Kindle instead and read a few pages. So I try to squeeze it in everywhere. I do have to read a lot of books to blurb. So like I'll get the books early and then I'll read it and then I'll provide like a sentence or two. So then that kind of makes it so I have less choice in my reading. So then I have to, which is great. Like it is great that I get to read these books early, but I'm such a mood reader that sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to read one that I pick out. So it's like this balance of trying to ensure I get to keep reading to also just understand what my peers are doing, what's out there, how are people storytelling these days, what kind of stories are they telling, and then also like supporting my fellow authors, and then just reading for pleasure too.
Yeah, you have for those in Portugal who don't know what a blurb is, when you read the book and then say something about it, something nice, of course. And you have a wonderful blurb in your cover. You have Jeneva Rose is the Queen of Twists by Colleen Hoover.
Yes,
She's also
that's a
very
very nice
popular.
blurb. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great and also a great author, Colleen Hoover. She's very popular in Portugal too. And you would have dinner with, I would have guessed, with the king of thriller, the father of Stephen King.
Yeah, I would be very interested just because I find him to be so intriguing, not only because of the quality of his writing, but also because his ideas. I'm just like, I would want to know, where do they come from? Because some of them I'm like, how did you come up with this? Or this is so weird or bizarre, like Pet Sematary. I love that book. And I'm like, how did you come up with such a horrifying idea? Or even like, going back to like Carrie, which was like, I think his first manuscript.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that? And then, he's just gotten some of the other books that are like The Green Mile, that's not in the horror, but it's still horrifying, the situation. I would just be so curious as to how he comes up with them
Yeah.
and how has so many different ideas and that none of his books are alike.
Yeah. And when now we're going to the books you chose for, and this question regards all of them. Do you read, are you able to read as a reader or as a writer? I mean, are you able to disconnect?
Sometimes, but I do sometimes I feel like when I read, I learn a lot too while I'm reading, and it's because I can't sometimes take my writer brain out of it, where I'll be like, oh wow, that's a really cool way or a very unique way or smart way to like introduce, a piece of backstory or to introduce a character or a great way to end a chapter or a great way to end or open a chapter. So there's a lot of times like that where I'm learning, and then there are other times where I'm like, oh, I would have done this instead, or oh, if they had taken out this one line, I wouldn't know the twist at this point. So then there's some of that too that I learn of things that I shouldn't do, or that me as a reader, I'm catching it. So then I'll try to make sure that doesn't happen in my novels, or like parts where I'm like, too much description here. Let's move the pace up, or this is like the perfect pace right now. So it is a
Okay.
lot of that, but I do try to remove myself and just enjoy it. But I can't, sometimes I can't help it. I'm just like, ooh, that's so smart, or
Of course, I figured. So the first book you chose, The Last Mrs. Parrish, A Outra Senhora Parrish in Portuguese, by Liv Constantine, which are actually two sisters, Lynn Constantine and Valerie Constantine. Tell me about this one.
The Last Mrs. Parrish. I remember when I read that book, I wanted to savor it, and I literally went to a park with it and sat out with my dog and just laid out in the sun reading it, and I was just carrying it around with me everywhere. But it's about a woman, a con woman, who befriends a wealthy couple with the intention of stealing the husband from the wife. But nothing is as it seems, and it's almost like this game of chess that unfolds between these characters. And it was just one that I thought was very, very smartly written with the plotting, the pacing, the twists, where you think you know what's happening, but you really don't know. And I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was very unique. And it wasn't something I had read at the time. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was. I have it with me because it was a Reese Witherspoon book club pick.
It was, yes. And I actually blurbed the second novel, the sequel to it, the next Mrs. Parrish. So that just came out last year, I think. Yeah, in 2020.
Okay, great.
So there's another one.
Yeah, every book you're mentioning, I'll put on the description of this episode. So, The Last Mrs. Parrish. It has a blurb by Karen Slaughter, which you chose a book from also. The Last Mrs. Parrish is an addictive and twisted debut. That's what she said. And so they are the Liv Constantine. It's the pen name of two sisters, Lynn and Valerie. They are bestsellers from the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today. And they have over 2 million copies sold worldwide and translated, same as you, translated into 29 languages and available in dozens of countries. So they have The Last Mrs. Parrish, The Wife Stalker, The Senator's Wife, The Stranger in the Mirror. And they are 17 years apart, the sisters.
Mhm.
Yeah. And Lynn, she was a former marketing executive with a master's degree. And then she also writes the Jack Logan series under the pen name Elsie Shaw. Did you
Mhm.
know that?
I did know that.
Have you read it? This Jack
I
Logan
haven't.
series?
I have not read the Elsie Shaw series, but I've read quite a few of theirs. It's actually kind of funny because before The Perfect Marriage published, I was at Thriller Fest, which is held in New York City every year, and you could go and like pitch to editors or agents, and they had like this pitch fest where you could go pair up with an author, and pitch to them before you went in. And I actually went in and pitched to Liv Constantine, Valerie, and Lynn. And it's funny because years later, because I was like, I love your guys' books. That's why I chose you to pitch to. And they were like, oh, your pitch was like perfect. I don't why are you pitching? Because I had an agent at the time too. And I was like, I don't know why. Um, but now I'm really good friends with Lynn. So it's been really cool that I was like, oh my God, back in 2019, I was pitching to you and telling you how much I love your books, and now like we're peers. And I think that's kind of cool. I never expected that.
Super cool. Yeah. And her sister Valerie, she has a degree in English literature from the University of Maryland. So they have different resumes, but then they're together, they write books together. I think that's very cool. Two sisters writing together.
Yeah, and they're so sweet too. I remember they were so nice to me and just so kind, and they were very supportive. And I
Cool.
think, yeah,
And are your friends?
now our friends. I'm like, oh my God.
So the last Mrs. Parrish. Another book you chose, the one in Portuguese, Almas Gêmeas. It's like soulmates. The one from John Mars.
Yes.
How far would you go to find the one? This is inspired actually a Netflix series, the one with the two Portuguese actors, Albano Jerónimo and Miguel Amorim. So for our Portuguese audience, will recognize the names. So, what do you think about this book? I mean, I know you loved it. Can you tell me why?
I loved it because a lot of thrillers, you just kind of get like the twist at the end, but this one was full of so many surprising moments. And there's this DNA test now. It's a speculative fiction thriller where when you take it, if someone else has taken it and you are their soulmate, you will know who your soulmate is. And so it follows five people that end up in becoming couples because they take the test, and it's very surprising because someone could be married and they take the test and they find out that they're not married to their soulmate. Or I won't reveal anything else. So I'm gonna get into like
Yeah.
all the nitty-gritty.
No, yeah,
But
but that's a premise. Yeah.
yeah, it is. It's very, very like there are so many shocking moments where I was just like, and so I loved it because of that. I loved it because it was so fresh and so smart for speculative fiction and a thriller. And then I was thinking of myself, if that test was available, I'm married and I've been with my husband now. We've been together for 11 years, married for 6. I'm like, would I take that test? I'm like, would he take that test? And what would we do if we found out we weren't soulmates? So I really liked it for that. I did watch the Netflix series. It's nothing like the book at all.
Okay.
So if you're thinking it's going to be like the book, it is not. They kind of just took the idea of there being a DNA test and they did an entirely different story. I love the book so much more. I wish they would have stuck to the book because it was just so smart. So I love it. I think it's fantastic speculative fiction thriller.
Yeah, it's like a dystopia.
Yes.
So the one by John Mars, Alma Gêmeas, he has other books translated into Portuguese. The Passengers, Os Passageiros, e the one, yeah, and the Passengers, yeah. So another book you chose, and we mentioned her already, Karin Slaughter, Pretty Girls. I
Mm-hmm.
interviewed in this podcast Paula Hawkins, which I assume you know. And I recommended this book to her because I loved it. I have
That's
it with
really
me.
good.
So tell me, Pretty Girls is a standalone
Yes.
thriller,
Karen Slaughter, I think she has a lot of like series, like Will Trent series, and then she had some,
the
and
Gritty
I'm
County.
yes. And then she has these standalone thrillers, and I absolutely love her standalone thrillers because I also love The Good Daughter. Um, and now I'm blanking on the other nouns because I love all of her standalone thrillers so much. But Pretty Girls is about three sisters. One of them went missing when she was a teenager, which was like 20 years before. And now you have these two sisters, and they couldn't be more different from one another. One is a glamorous housewife, the other one is a single mother dating a con man. And all of like everything comes up with the sister that went missing. That's all I'll say there. But I always like preface to people like it's very, very dark, but I like dark thrillers. But it was also another one of those where it takes a lot to be able to like fool me or like, me to not guess the twist. And that was one where I was so immersed in the story. And then when the twist started coming, I was shocked. And I do like that she crossed the line to be very, very dark. Like she was like, this is what it is, and I'm not going to like sanitize this. It's going to be dark. So I really appreciated that. And I think it was very well done for how dark it was, because sometimes it can be very gratuitous. And it just was very well done, and it's dark. So I always tell people, check your triggers for that one, but it's very well done, very shocking, very twisty.
Yeah, I'm not despite reading all these books, I'm more like a romance reader than a thriller.
That's my
But
second favorite genre to read is romance.
yeah,
I
romance,
should
eh?
throw in some romance novels, but I
Uh,
figured if I'm known for thrillers, I do all thrillers.
yeah, no, but it's great because actually people speak less of thrillers, especially on this podcast. So, and once I interviewed, Cecelia Ahern. She
Okay.
wrote, yeah, she wrote P.S. I Love You, which
Hmm.
is more known to the audience. And I loved her last one. Actually, it's not the last. She published Into the Storm later, but then she has let me in a thousand different ways, and it's a beautiful book. And I've read it, and I tried to bring her to Portugal. I don't have that power, but I can try. And so I interviewed Cecelia Ahern, and and I recommend to you the conversation. And she chose, as same as you, four books. And she chose three. And then the fourth one was Everything by Karin Slaughter. The Grand County series, and all of them. And so I started the Grand County series. I have yet to start Will Trent series, but then same as you, I picked up the standalone and Pretty Girls. Yes, it is tough, but it's a great book.
And she does research, like she really researches her books. So like, everything is accurate from like what it would really be from like a police procedural standpoint. So I really admire that too. She goes all out for research, ensuring complete accuracy, which is
Yeah.
very impressive. Because I
She
know how
just
long it takes to write a book. So to have to do all the research, and she talks to everyone she can possibly can. So I very much admire that too.
Yeah, and I invited her for this podcast, and her agent answered quickly, very professional, and she said she's soon to be releasing a new book, so we'll wait then. So I don't know, maybe in a month or two, I'll get to talk to her about her latest book. So great,
That'd be great.
I'll hope you'll hear it too.
Yes.
So Pretty Girls, in Portuguese, Flores Cortadas by Karin Slaughter. Another one you chose. This one I didn't find in Portuguese, but for those who want to read in English, The Grace Year by Kim Liggett, a dystopian novel that has been highly praised and is being adapted for TV. You want to tell me
Yes.
about it? Yeah.
This one is very different from the other ones I picked because it is a dystopian and it's more leads at a like young adult, new adult, probably more young adult. Very much like The Handmaid's Tale, but it's about the grace years when girls turn 16. And it's believed, like in this dystopian world, that women have to go out into the woods and live there for a year in order to get rid of like their power that they have, their essence. But while out there, a bunch of 16-year-old girls that are all meant to go out there, they're also supposed to try to like land a husband, and then there are poachers that will take them and then they'll never be seen again, and they're warned of that. So they have to basically survive out in the woods for a year in order to get rid of their magic. It's it's very much like Handmaid's Tale. It's just a very immersive reading experience. It is, even though I wouldn't consider it a thriller, there's lots of twists throughout. And it's one just that just really surprised me because I don't really read a lot of young adult books. I actually rarely read any young adult books. So it's very much surprising. I found the concept so interesting that I wanted to pick it up. It ended up being darker than I thought it would be for young adult, but I really enjoyed it. And it was a different reading experience than what I typically read, which is more thrillers, true crime, romance. And I kind of stepped outside of it and did more dystopian.
Okay. I'm putting down here notes that I can tell you in the end, but I'll get there. So the Grace here, one it would be One de Graça, but not in Portuguese, by Kim Liggett. Uh, she's known for her young adult novels that blend elements of horror, thriller, and romance. Same as you said. She has Blood and Salt, Heart of Ash, The Last Harvest, and The Unfortunate, all young adult thriller. You know, I remembered. I don't remember the title of the books, but there's this author that I used to read. And this book, yours, the Grace here, is more dark. But she
Mhm.
has this beautiful dystopian novel, three actually. You know, Lauren Oliver, the author. She has.
No.
I'll text you. I'll email you the name, and I'll put for those who are listening to us. I'll put in the description of this episode. She has. It's a dystopian with teenagers, and they live in a world which they say love is a disease. And if you catch love, you cannot catch love. It's like a disease. And then you cannot cross the border. You have like a fence throughout surrounding their world. I've read it more than 15 years ago, I guess, so I don't remember that well. But I do, I still remember a little, which is something.
Mhm.
So there's this girl, she meets a boy, and he's outside a fence. And she thinks that she's ill because she's having the symptoms, continually thinking about him. She's lost her appetite, and it's very sweet because it all makes sense, the symptoms of love.
Mhm.
And it's also it's a very interesting book, and I've barely heard of her, but she's written a lot. She has roommates. She also writes thriller, so I recommend to you Lauren Oliver, but I'll put the notes here. Because I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the novel, but you made me remind me of her. So now I have one last question.
I wrote her name down because that sounds like a really interesting concept of like
Yeah,
love is contagious and you don't want to catch it.
exactly. You don't want exactly that. That's beautiful. It's a great idea, and the books are very well written. So yeah, I'm same as you. I wouldn't read young adult anymore. I've read a lot, and I loved that one, Lauren Oliver. Yeah, and she has several other books, including thrillers. So I think it's a good recommendation for you. So the question I have, last one, but not least, you have The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine, the two sisters, The One by John Mars, Pretty Girls, Karin Slaughter, and The Gracier, Kim Liggett. Choose one.
Oh, that is very tough. I'm only gonna choose it based on length of the novel because you get more bang for your buck because it's longer. And I'm gonna choose Pretty Girls. That's the only way I can do it, to be fair. It's a longer novel, more bang for your buck. Um,
Yeah.
that's my only reasoning. Very diplomatic.
Okay. So at the end of this conversation, having into account what you said as a to getting to know you as a reader, I have recommendations for you. So Lauren
Okay.
Oliver is the first.
Mhm.
I think the titles it's like something like in Latin or something. It's a trilogy, Lauren Oliver. But I'll write it down for those who are listening to and with the episode description. So other books I recommend to you. The first one you chose, The Last Mrs. Parrish. It was not only praised by Karin Slaughter, but I read, when they say, I feel like this, you're going to like that one, or so you're going to love this book, The Last Mrs. Parrish, if you like Leanne Moriarty. And she's one of my favorite authors.
I love Leah Morati. I should have actually picked one of hers. I've read like I think almost all of her books except for her most recent one, just because
Ah,
it's sitting on my
exactly.
yeah,
You
it's sitting
have
on my
it.
shelf. I just haven't had time to rip into that one.
Yeah,
But I
well, say,
love her books.
yeah, so I figured you would. So that's why, yeah, people who listen to this podcast already know that. I always recommend Liane Moriarty. I love them all. And I have the last one, so you have it also. Here One Moment, but it's also translated into Portuguese, and it just arrived in Portugal. It's called A Qualquer Momento, and I haven't read it yet, but yeah, sure, it's Liane, so quality guaranteed. It's someone
Yes.
I remember I watched an interview of her about this book, and she said she had the idea when she was on a plane. And she said, look, what about if everyone dies? What about if everyone knows how or when they will die? So it's about that. I remember more the idea than the the outcome. Haven't read it yet. So okay, I cannot recommend you Liane Moriarty. It's not news to you. So another author, and here I had this Portuguese writer, Lénia Rufino, and she's a thriller lover. So I remembered she mentioned an author I didn't know, and probably you'll like him. Chris Carter. Have you heard of him?
I've heard of the name, but I haven't read any of the books
Okay.
yet.
He is darker. So like even Lenya, she told me, okay, Mariana, don't read it. Don't read him. Maybe not for me because he's too dark, but his path to success is great. His the way because he was born in Brazil, then he moved to the US where he graduated in psychology with a master in criminology. Then he later worked as a criminal psychologist in real life and with numerous cases of serial killers and serious crimes, the real deal. Then he left his job, he moved to LA, became a musician, later moved to London, became a professional musician, and then a writer. So he writes about crime, and I read an interview of him, and he said, like, I don't know. I don't know the plot. I don't, like you said about your work, Geneva. I don't plot everything. Something
Mhm.
happens. So, as a real life criminal psychologist, he said, what happens next? What should be done next? And that's
Yeah.
how he writes his books. And I love the description, and he has several. And he never thought of being a writer, but there was one day he woke up and he had this dream, and he told it to his then girlfriend. And she said, I like that story. You should write it down. And I especially like the ending. And it was The Crucifix Killer, his first book. So he had a dream, he had an idea. And now he's a writer, a best-selling writer. And the book that the author that I interviewed here, she's seeing Lénia Rufino, she chose An Evil Mind. In Portuguese, uma mente perversa. Perversa means like twisted, an evil mind. So I recommend Liane Moriarty, sure, and Chris Carter for you to try.
I wrote it down because that
Eh?
sounds really interesting. And I like how his brain thinks and that he has all of that background to really put into the books. Real,
Ex-
raw stuff.
Exactly. That's why I chose him to recommend to you. So thank you very much. It was great having you.
Thank you. And I walk away with some good book recommendations. And I do want to read Leanne's newest one. I just have to finish a book on blurbing and then do it.
We'll exchange our comments. And by Jeneva Rose, in Portuguese, O Casamento Perfeito, and soon The Perfect Divorce, hopefully in Portugal. Thank you so much, Geneva.
Thank you so much.
See you next time.